you guys so much. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm excited to be speaking with everyone. My name is Katie Smith. Like Eliza said, I've spent the last 11 or so months serving with two organizations in Mendocino County, the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council, as well as the Resource Conservation District. And I just wanted to start by thanking folks for being here. I'm flattered that a lot of people have taken time out of what I know are busy days to be here, so thank you for that. So I had a bit of a unique GrizzlyCorps placement to other folks because I did split time between two different organizations and held two completely different roles in those two organizations. And a great thing about that was that I got to develop two entirely different skill sets between the two. And I also had the opportunity to make twice as many connections within the county. And I think it gave me just a really wonderful view of the forestry, water, and soil resource concerns in Mendocino County. And I got a really holistic view of a lot of the issues facing our communities here. So I took this picture a couple of weeks ago in the Anderson Valley, and I just thought it was cool because it is a really nice little timeline of my time as a GrizzlyCorps fellow with the fire department Knox box on the left, which was kind of a critical part of one of the first projects I did as a GrizzlyCorps fellow that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. And then with the Navarro watershed flow enhancement on the right, which is a position that I'll be stepping into after my time as a GrizzlyCorps fellow ends. So I mostly wanted to take this as an opportunity to talk about a number of the projects that I've had the opportunity to work on with these two teams in the past 11 months, because there have been a lot of projects and it was pretty impossible just to pick one or two to focus on. So I apologize if I might have been a bit ambitious with how much I'll talk through. So it'll be the highlight reel of my GrizzlyCorps fellowship here. So to begin with the the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council, just to give a brief overview of the organization. It's a relatively small nonprofit that has just a completely outsized impact on the community here in Mendocino. They have quickly grown over the past couple of years to become a really essential part of the wildfire preparedness effort in the county. And I'm just consistently blown away by how many projects and how much knowledge this really small staff is able to take on. So the first project that I really jumped into with the Fire Safe Council was working on these community emergency response maps. So basically these maps are a fine-grained detail of rural communities intended to communicate to first responders some of the essential knowledge that is helpful when protecting these rural spaces. So you don't have to live in Mendocino County very long to realize that Google Maps is pretty worthless because there are hundreds of these rural subdivisions that have unnamed roads or roads that show up on a map but don't actually exist, or might have one way in, one way out access, or poor water supplies, all of which makes fighting fire extremely difficult. So basically these maps are intended to provide firefighters who might be from out of town and not have any knowledge of our communities with some of the critical information that they might need when trying to protect lives and infrastructure. So they're really a collaboration between a map maker and the community itself. So they start with a map maker creating a base map that includes things like parcel layers, address points, building locations, all sorts of stuff like that. And then they really get down to the nitty-gritty when a community member adds more specific details. Things like where alternate water sources might be, places where fire engines could turn around if they need to access narrow roads, and things of that nature. So when I came on to the Fire Safe Council, they were in the middle of a pilot project of making these, or maps, as we say, for 4 communities in the Hopland area. And part of that grant was intended to document the process of making these maps so that it could be replicated by other communities throughout the county. So I came in and I got to get the A to Z instructions of how to make these maps. And I developed a number of training documents, some of which you see here. So this down in the bottom corner was pretty much the GIS 101 of how you might create this map, which is fun to make, and things such as the standard symbology guide, and then volunteer training for events and maps. And we kind of, that all culminated into a couple of community meetings that we did, sharing this knowledge and hopefully inspiring some other communities to make these maps for themselves. And one really neat thing that came out of this project, and just a little plug for AmeriCorps members, I guess, and grant-funded organizations, is that because the Fire Safe Council was able to take advantage of my fellowship and wasn't paying a staff member or a contractor to do this work, they were able to fund those lock boxes for the 3 communities that received maps out of this project. So that was a cool kind of consequence of my participation in this project, and it was a really fun way to start. So the next thing that I dove into with the Fire Safe Council was getting into grant application season. So throughout the beginning of this year, the Fire Safe Council applied for a number of CAL FIRE fire prevention grants for tons of projects throughout the county, and all of which required maps. So this was a nice next step in my mapping journey with the emergency response maps, helping me brush up on some of my skills. And then this project really just helped increase my confidence with GIS and taught me so many new skills because, as with many things with GIS, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the more fun it gets. So having 2 intensive months of making these maps really increased my proficiency and was a highlight of my time here at the Fire Safe Council. And then just kind of to sing the praises of the folks at the Fire Safe Council that were actually writing these grants and were coordinating with CAL FIRE to make sure that these projects were priorities and were fundable. They ended up receiving about $3.5 million in grant funding for the county of Mendocino for various projects throughout the county. So you can see just a couple that I chose to put on this slide. One project on the right side you can see is in the Western Hills in the Ukiah Valley, a big project that CAL FIRE was able to put in 2020 under the state of emergency of various control lines and prescribed burn plots, but then they needed CEQA to continue to maintain and develop. So that was one project, just one example of a project that was funded this year. But there's also, we're successful in receiving funding for a bunch of roadside clearing projects, funding education and outreach, and lots of other different things going on around the county. And then finally, to wrap up my my mapping with the Fire Safe Council, another big project that I've really been focused on for the past couple months lately is this Mendocino County Wildfire Preparedness Project's master map. And this project really came out of all of those maps that we made for the grant applications and a realized need for a good list of all the projects that are currently underway around the county, as well as those that are proposed or planned or might be in the process of receiving environmental review, and as well as a way to prioritize those projects so that when funding opportunities come up, it's easier to identify which projects you want to apply for funding for. So with that idea in mind, I kind of got to put all my ESRI skills to knowledge using the whole suite of applications you can see here to put together this map. So it started with a database of a list of all the projects that we could skim up around the county that were either recently completed, in process. They might have partially have the environmental review done, but were not in have not begun implementation, or those that are proposed. And I got to say at this point that Emily, who's the county coordinator for the Fire Safe Council, was such a champion of this project and spent lots of time and effort looking for these projects and compiling this database of projects. And from there, I was able to take those projects that were actually mapped and create this web map that you can see on the right side here, which is a little bit hard to see, but you can see all those gray lines are many of the projects going on around the county. And this is actually a little bit out of date now because I did this last week and we've added projects since then, which is exciting. And the neat thing about this tool is that each of these projects has information stored in the attribute table, things like project status, number of acres, lead agency, the cost to do the project. So you can, the idea being that you can search and filter for different types of projects. So for example, if you were looking for shovel-ready projects, you could filter countywide by projects that have CEQA completed, and you would turn up a list of projects that then could be you could apply for implementation funding. So hopefully that'll be a useful tool that the Fire Safe Council will continue to use and develop, because it is very much still in process. But from that, we were also able to make a more public-facing story map, which holds both the database and the map, and then it links to a survey 123, which basically integrates with the map and prompts folks to input all the information necessary to get a project included on the map, because that was a real challenge of getting the correct information, including the maps and the actual location of these projects so that they could be included on the map. So before I move on to talk about some of my projects with the Resource Conservation District over the past year, I just wanted to throw in a couple more honorable mentions, because I really did get to work on so many wonderful projects with the Fire Safe Council over the past year. So at the top, you can see a fuels reduction training on a misty morning in Willits that I think of fondly now, as it's in the 90s for the past couple weeks. And I got to attend the California Fire Safe Council conference in Sacramento. I helped volunteer at a super fun fundraiser called the Homebrew Festival that I highly recommend people attending if they're in the area. And then these last photos you see were a really interesting event that I got to attend right when I started with the Fire Safe Council. There had been a small but devastating fire right outside of Ukiah right when I started. And I attended kind of a debrief with some of the first responders and other fire professionals about the factors that influenced what homes survived and what homes did not. So it was really sobering start, but an interesting space to get to be a part of. So on to my next job. I also worked with the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District over the past year. And so the RCD works with landowners on a voluntary basis on soil, water, and forestry best practices. So I worked in the soils program and worked on a ton of projects, one of which being the California Department of Food and Agriculture Climate Smart Ag Technical Assistance. So basically, this was one of the first things that I worked on when I initially came on with the RCD. And this was providing technical assistance to farmers that were interested in applying for soil and water financial incentives to try implementing these practices on their farms and ranches. So this was a really fun activity because I was getting up to speed and then turning around and helping farmers understand and apply for these grants. And it was an exciting time. I had tons of Zoom meetings and was meeting folks from around the county and really just brushing up on all these practices myself and getting familiar with all the different areas of the county at the same time. So it was really exciting. And I worked really closely with my supervisor, Linda, while I was getting up to speed. And I also had to throw in this little "we're hiring" thing because that was at the time when Seth Myrick came on as the Sustainable Ag Project Manager, who I worked super closely with, as well as Linda for the rest of my term. And so that was an exciting time at the RCD, definitely. Is it the change? Oops, sorry. Another project that I got to work on really closely over the past year is the Farm to School program, which was a super fun one. We developed 3 curriculum that we then delivered to 2 schools around Mendocino County in soil health, climate beneficial agriculture, and native plants and pollinators. And we went to Fort Bragg 6th grade classroom and then Laytonville High School, the bio and earth science classes, and delivered those 3 modules. You can see some of the really cute thank you letters that we got from the 6th graders, and then some of our demonstrations in our curriculum up top. We did some of these demonstrations on soil structure and different soil properties under various types of management. And yeah, those hands-on activities are super fun to do. So this is a slate test you can see. And we also have a rainfall demonstration, which are both pretty impactful, and the kids always like those. So those are exciting. And then this last photo you'll see here, we got to get involved with the Laytonville Elementary School program as well this summer. And so we did the same curriculum delivered to a group of kids from the ages of 5 to 13, which was kind of a challenge, but a fun one to try and get children interested in soil health beyond just the fact that it's dirt and it's dirty and it's fun. But really this whole project was really close to my heart because I had the benefit of having a lot of really amazing educators when I was in school that got me excited in soil health and permaculture and all this stuff. So it's just really fun to get to go into a classroom and completely nerd out about biodiversity and soil health, and hope that some of those kids are getting passionate and might remember it as they're growing up and learning more about this stuff. So that's a program that I'm excited to continue to be a part of. And then last, but certainly not least here, has been my carbon farm planning journey, which involved taking a professional course series from the Chico Center for Regenerative Ag and Resilient Systems, which is always a mouthful. And this has and continues to be just such a highlight of my job. I always leave every field visit, and when I really get my head into this planning mode, I just like leave so fulfilled, because I think carbon farm planning is such an exciting both solution and just it's a wonderful practice to get to be a part of, and a community to get to be a part of. So Jasmine actually gave me a really nice intro of what carbon farm planning is, which I am grateful for. But basically, it's a practice of brainstorming how you can maximize carbon capture on working landscapes. And the really exciting thing about it is that it is both a climate solution, and it is a practice that helps mitigate the effects of climate change and those impacts on farmers. So it helps farmers be more resilient to droughts and floods and pests, and it has just a host of other co-benefits, and it's a lovely practice of walking the land. It usually begins with a land walk with the landowners, and you discuss resource concerns, opportunities for carbon capture, and the goals of the landowner. And you kind of take that home and turn it into a big brainstorm of different practices that you can implement to achieve some of those goals. And it ends up looking something like this, which you can see in the middle, which is just one example from a carbon farm plan that we worked on over the past year. So that's been a really wonderful practice. And so I got to attend a bunch of trainings as I was learning this carbon farm planning. So I took four courses through CSU Chico, and I was able to attend the Soil Health Academy with Understanding Ag, who are the folks that did Kiss the Ground, if you saw that. And then finally, I just attended the Carbon Cycle Institute's carbon farm planning training. And so all those things have just given me such a good breadth of knowledge, and introduced me to this really wonderful community that I'm happy to be a part of. So more honorable mentions that just there isn't enough time to talk about all the fun and amazing work that I got to be a part of this year. So there's a couple photos of different workshops that we got to host this spring, of pollinator hedgerows and of all sorts of baby lambs that I always loved seeing on fiber shed walks. And then you'll see this forestry picture in the bottom. I had to give one shout out to the RCD's forestry program manager, Bryce Hutchins, and former GrizzlyCorps alum, who always invited me out on field days, even if I almost always had to decline because I had other things going on. But that was really fun when I did get to participate. So that's all I have. There are just so many things I could talk about, and I just feel so grateful to have come into this position and ended up with 2 host sites that gave me such a rich experience and such a diverse experience in Mendocino County. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be a part of this community, and super thankful for my supervisors and coworkers at the RCD, Beth and Linda especially, and at the Fire Safety Council, Scott and Emily, and then all the folks at GrizzlyCorps who just made this a really amazing AmeriCorps program. I've been involved in AmeriCorps before, and this one blew it out of the water. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. And I think we do have time for questions potentially.
That was amazing, Katie. Thank you so much. We are running a bit behind, but want to honor if anyone has a couple questions. So you could probably do 1 or 2, or any congratulations. Also feel free to throw any of your questions or congratulations in the chat as well.